the fallen Colossus. That's what the locals call it anyway. Sounds grand, doesn't it? Like some mythical beast slain in a glorious battle. Truth is, it's just a big dead metal husk, half buried in the rust-colored dust of this rat-trap planet. Scoria, they call it. Home. Not mine, obviously. I had one of those once. A real home. My name is Grint, and dwelling on the past won't recharge my suit or get me off this rock. The scale of the wreck is impressive, I'll give it that. This thing was colossal, a warship from the size of it, maybe a dreadnought. Dwarfed anything back in my home system, even the orbital platforms around Krieger. Must have been one hell of a fight. 2 empires slugging it out with tech like this. Makes you wonder what happened to them. Did they blow each other back to the Stone Age? Did they ascend to a higher plane of existence like some of the laborers believe? Or did they unleash something they couldn't control? Something worse than their own weapons? Probably best I don't find out. Judging by the damage, the Colossus lost this round. Its dark, jagged silhouette juts out from the landscape like a broken tombstone, a monument to a war fought and lost before the apes on this planet figured out how to bang rocks together. The hull is some kind of advanced alloy, pockmarked with craters and scored with the telltale lines of energy weapon impacts. Whatever they were packing, it wasn't standard issue, I can tell you that. My suit's scanner, what's left of it at least, can't even get a proper reading on the metal. Composition unknown. It flashes helpfully. Right, like I couldn't have figured that out myself. My primary objective is a stable power source. It's a long shot, but this wreck is the only place left to look. This far out, you take what you can get. Besides, this is my last shot. My suit's microfusion reactor is failing, sputtering like a dying man's last breath. Without a replacement, I'm just another piece of scrap metal waiting to be buried under the Scorian dust. I run my gloved hand over a section of exposed hull. My suit's HUD, flickering as it is, helpfully informs me that the external temperature is a balmy 5 degrees Celsius. Lucky me. The sun, a swollen, dying red giant, hangs low in the sky. This whole planet feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter the silence. They call me the Sky God. It's a joke, really, a bad one. But out here, jokes have a way of turning serious. When I crash-landed here, my suit, even busted up as it was, must have looked like something out of their primitive myths. Divine armor. A gift from the heavens. They were wrong, of course, but I saw no reason to correct them. Not while it benefited me. They offered food, water, shelter, everything I needed to survive. The Scorians are a simple people, bronze-skinned humanoids, a bit shorter than us but wiry and strong, adapted to this harsh wasteland. They live in scattered settlements, built from salvaged metal and hardened clay, clustered around the few remaining water sources. They farm this red dirt. It's a hard life. They're easy to impress, though. Their tech level is barely above the Iron Age. They've got some basic understanding of metalworking, mostly from scavenging the Colossus. They fashion tools, crude weapons, spears, axes, clubs, nothing that could even scratch my suit's armor. Not that it matters. It's practically useless with no reliable power. Their society is built around a theocracy, ruled by the prophets, the priestly caste who claim to interpret my will. Below them are the chosen, the warrior caste. Big surprise there, always a warrior caste. They enforce the prophet's decrees and keep the laborers, the worker drones, in line. Predictable, really. At first it was a simple trade. They gave me what I needed, and I let them believe what they wanted. My suit was my leverage, gave them a reason to treat me better. It was mutually beneficial, but the longer I stay, the more complicated things get. My suit is falling apart. Deprecated. The diagnostic screen flashes, a nice way of saying falling to pieces. The power fluctuations are getting worse, the life support is unreliable, and the cloaking, a short burst system that lets me disappear for a few seconds, is practically useless now. Useless, and a massive energy drain. And then there's the problem of their expectations. They expect miracles, you see. Protection, guidance, rain. They don't understand that their God is running on fumes and prayers, and my prayers are usually curses. Just the other day, I had to break up a squabble between two laborers over a water ration. Ended up using the energy blade, the retractable one in my forearm, to cut a fallen beam in half. Impressive display, sure, scared them straight. But it drained the last dregs of consistent power from my reserves. Stupid, wasteful, but necessary. Got to keep up appearances. And the prophets are getting restless. They can sense something is wrong. Especially Tyros. He's the youngest of the bunch, ambitious, with eyes that are a little too sharp for his own good. He's been asking questions, probing, testing. He wants to know where I come from, why the sky god has chosen to grace them with his presence now. The older prophets, the ones set in their ways, they try to shut him down, call it heresy. But Tyros has a way of twisting things, making it seem like he's the truly devout one, the only one brave enough to question the will of his God in search of true understanding. He's playing the long game. He also mentioned something about the omens. The ground shakes, he says. There are lights in the sky where no stars shine. He thinks I'm angry. He thinks they've done something wrong. It's all a load of bantha fodder, but it is making my life more difficult. And then, there's the environmental anomalies. Something new. My suit's scanner has been picking up some strange readings lately. Localized energy fluctuations. Tremors that seem to originate from deep beneath the surface. Nothing concrete. Nothing I can put my finger on. Minor seismic activity, the diagnostics say. Localized gravitational anomalies. Probably just glitches in my failing systems. The native population seems to be reacting to something. It is hard to tell what is religious fervor and what is new. They are starting to act on irrational impulses. Small things mostly. Old spacer tales used to speak of cursed planets, things buried beneath the surface, best left alone. Probably just tall tales to scare the rookies. Still, it is starting to make me wonder. A sudden clang snaps me out of my thoughts. A group of chosen, their faces painted with ochre and red, are approaching. They're here to summon me, of course. Another audience with the council. Probably about the tremors, the omens, Tyros' latest attempt to expose me, or another test. My gut tightens. I can't afford another test. I can barely power the suit enough to walk, let alone perform miracles. But I nod, gesturing for them to lead the way. The sky god will hear their pleas, I say, my voice amplified and distorted by the suit's external speakers, giving it an appropriately godlike boom. As we walk towards the main settlement, I realize the Scorians' superstitions might not be entirely baseless. The subtle vibrations, the energy readings my suit's picking up, it all points to something bad, something ancient, stirring beneath our feet. Something worse than their pathetic excuse for a god, worse even than my failing suit. Something is waking up, and I have a sinking feeling that my time is running out, faster than the juice in this thrice-damned suit. We reach their temple and I can see Tyros waiting for me, a smug, knowing look in his eyes. The other prophets are huddled around him, fear etched on their faces. They want a miracle, a sign, anything to prove their faith isn't misplaced. I just need to buy some time. Time to find a solution, to fix this suit, or time for this whole charade to come crashing down around me. Either way, time is the one thing I don't have. Tyros' eyes, sharp and questioning, bored into me. The other prophets, their expressions a blend of fear and burgeoning doubt, shifted nervously around him. The air in the temple, usually thick with the scent of burning incense, now crackled with a different kind of energy. A raw, volatile tension that mirrored the tremors shaking the ground beneath our feet. "The earth groans, sky god," Tyros said, his voice smooth and laced with a hint of accusation. "The lights in the heavens shift and whirl. The people are afraid. They speak of your displeasure, their voices filled with fear of your anger. They murmur in the shadows, questioning the signs, wondering what they mean." He paused, his focus sharp and unwavering. "What trials must we endure? What sacrifices must be made to appease your wrath?" My suit's HUD flashed a warning. Power levels critical. Great, just what I needed. A theological debate while my life support was running on fumes. I decided to keep my answer vague, knowing vagueness was the currency of gods and politicians. "The path to enlightenment is never easy," I boomed, my voice modulator adding a layer of artificial gravitas. "Trials are necessary. Tests of faith. Only through obedience and unwavering devotion can you hope to understand the great plan." An older prophet, Gorel, his face deeply lined and his eyes filled with a fanatic's zeal, stepped forward. "Speak plainly, Sky God. What must we do?" "We must show our devotion," a frail, ancient-looking prophet added. "We must prove our faith. We have been lax in our duties." He looked imploringly at me. "Show us a sign, Sky God. Show us your power, and we will know we are on the right path." The pressure was mounting. They wanted a miracle, a sign, and my bag of tricks was rapidly emptying. My eyes drifted to the crude depictions of me on the walls, the Sky God descending from the heavens in a blaze of glory. If only it were that simple. I needed to buy time to divert their attention. And then it hit me. The weapon. "The tremors," I declared, my voice echoing through the temple, "are a test, yes, but also a warning. A warning against those who would threaten your safety, who would seek to usurp the rightful order." I paused for effect, letting my words sink in. "There is a way to ensure your safety, to demonstrate your devotion. I will guide you. Together we will forge a weapon of immense power, a symbol of your faith, a shield against the darkness." The prophets murmured amongst themselves, their fear momentarily overshadowed by a spark of hope. Tyros, however, remained skeptical. "A weapon, Sky God? What form will it take? How can we, with our limited knowledge, create such a thing?" He folded his arms, challenging me. "I will provide the knowledge," I replied. "The fallen Colossus holds secrets, ancient technologies that can be repurposed, guided by my hand. It is time to fully utilize its power, not for mere survival but for protection." The plan was bordering on insane. It would mean diverting precious resources, manpower, and risking exposure. But it was the only card I had left to play. And if I could get them focused on building their doomsday device, maybe I could buy enough time to find a real solution, a way to fix my suit, or at least figure out what was causing the tremors. Over the next few weeks, the main settlement transformed into a frantic construction site. I, playing the role of divine instructor, guided a team of chosen and laborers, teaching them the basics of energy manipulation, circuit construction, and weapon design. The core of the weapon, which I dubbed the Sky God's Wrath for dramatic effect, would be a salvaged energy cell from the Colossus, a powerful but unstable artifact that I hoped to modify into a directed energy weapon. It was jury-rigged, dangerous, and had a high probability of backfiring, literally. My suit's scanner identified the cell as a Class C graviton emitter, whatever that meant. Sounded impressive, though. The Scorians, fueled by religious fervor and a desperate need to believe, worked tirelessly, their initial fear replaced by a sense of purpose. Even Tyros seemed somewhat impressed, although his skepticism remained, a knot in the pit of my stomach. As we worked, my suit continued to degrade. I found myself rationing my movements, conserving energy, even shutting down non-essential systems to prolong the inevitable. The tremors, too, were getting worse, stronger and more frequent, accompanied by strange, localized distortions in the electromagnetic field that my suit's sensors struggled to interpret. They were definitely not gravitational anomalies, as the diagnostic kept helpfully suggesting. There's a pattern here, a kind of resonance. It's like something deep within the planet is waking up, reacting to the energy cell's activation. The areas around the Colossus were becoming increasingly unstable. The ground would buckle unexpectedly, metal structures would warp and twist, and a faint green glow began to emanate from the deepest fissures. The laborers were starting to exhibit increasingly strange behavior. Their movements became slow and halting, like puppets on tangled strings, their eyes unfocused, distant. They would stop working abruptly, staring blankly into space, unresponsive to my commands. When I tried to rouse them, they would react with sudden, unpredictable aggression, lashing out with a strength that belied their malnourished frames. It was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain order, to keep them focused on the task at hand. Then came the day of the demonstration. The Sky God's wrath, a monstrous, unwieldy contraption of salvaged metal and scavenged components, was finally ready. The entire settlement gathered to witness its power. I stood beside the weapon, my suit barely holding together, and offered a silent prayer to any god who might be listening, even though I was pretty sure the only god around was the one made of rapidly degrading circuits and failing power cells. With a nod from me, a team of Chosen activated the weapon. The energy cell hummed, then roared, emitting a blinding beam of light that shot into the sky, leaving a trail of ionized air in its wake. For a moment, it seemed to work. The crowd gasped, their faces illuminated by the unearthly glow. Then, disaster struck. The energy cell overloaded. A deafening explosion ripped through the air, sending shockwaves across the settlement. The Sky God's wrath disintegrated into a shower of molten metal. Bodies were thrown back by the blast, limbs twisted and broken. I shielded myself as best I could, but the blast still hit my suit hard. The HUD flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I could feel the searing heat, the sharp sting of shrapnel. My systems screamed warnings I could no longer see. When the dust settled, the scene was one of utter devastation. Several Scorians lay dead, including some of the older, more devout prophets. Many more were injured, their bodies racked with burns and lacerations. The weapon, the symbol of their faith and my deception, was gone, reduced to a smouldering pile of scrap. Tyros, miraculously unharmed, stood amidst the chaos, his eyes blazing with fury. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "False god!" he breathed, his voice hoarse with rage. "You have brought ruin upon us! This was no test, this was a lie!" The surviving Scorians, their faces contorted with grief and anger, turned towards me. The seeds of doubt, sown by Tyros and watered by this catastrophe, had finally bloomed. My carefully constructed facade was crumbling. I was exposed. My only hope now lay in the depths of the Colossus. Injured, my suit failing, I had to reach the ship's core, the source of the strange energy readings. I had to find a new power source, or at least answers, before either the Scorians or the awakening entity buried beneath this cursed planet finished me off. I was no god, just a man trapped in a rusty suit of armor, staring into the abyss. And the abyss, it seemed, was staring back. I rallied a handful of laborers, the ones who still held onto a sliver of faith, or perhaps were simply too terrified to defy me. Under the cover of the chaos, we slipped away from the settlement, leaving behind the cries of the wounded and the wrath of Tyros. The tremors were almost constant now, the ground heaving and groaning beneath our feet as we made our way towards the Colossus. The laborers, their faces pale with terror, followed me without question, their belief in the Sky God, however battered, still their only anchor in a world rapidly spiraling out of control. The trek back to the fallen Colossus was a grueling struggle against the failing gravity and mounting dread. The ground bucked and heaved like a living thing, throwing us off balance. Each tremor that ripped through the earth felt like a hammer blow against my dwindling hope. The laborers, their faces stricken with primal terror, stumbled alongside me, their loyalty the only thing keeping them from fleeing into the rust-colored wastes. We reached the Colossus, a skeletal silhouette against the red star. It towered over us, a monument to a forgotten war, and now perhaps a tomb for an entire civilization. I could feel the entity's presence more strongly here. The air itself seemed to vibrate, making the loose metal around us rattle and the dust on the floor dance in swirling patterns. The laborers were barely holding it together. Some were chanting prayers, their voices trembling, while others had simply given up, their movements sluggish and unresponsive, their stares distant. They were being driven to madness by the forces coming from beneath the surface. "We need to get inside," I rasped, my voice barely a croak above the groaning of the earth. There's an access point near the stern. We need to hurry. The sky god was gone. They followed a man now, a desperate man. The laborers, driven by a mix of fear and residual faith, followed me without question. We scrambled over twisted girders and through gaping breaches in the hull, the decaying metal groaning under our weight. I could hear the rhythmic beating more clearly now, a heavy drone that synchronized with the tremors. It was a disconcerting, visceral sensation, like the amplified strokes of some colossal, subterranean heart. My suit's HUD was completely gone, the screen a dark, useless void. I was operating on instinct now, guided by a rapidly fading hope and the growing sense that we were running out of time. We needed a miracle, an escape. "Start digging!" I roared at the laborers, my voice desperate. "Clear the wreckage! There has to be something here, anything that can help us." They were beyond reason, driven by a terror I could almost taste, but they responded to the primal urgency in my command. They tore at the wreckage with their bare hands and salvaged tools, their movements frantic, uncoordinated. I scrambled on top of a pile of wreckage, scanning the area, my eyes darting across the mangled metal, searching for anything that could offer a way out. And then I saw something. Partially buried beneath a collapsed section of bulkhead, almost hidden in the wreckage field the laborers were creating, the curved, cylindrical shape of an escape pod. Hope, sharp and sudden, pierced through the despair. "There!" I commanded, pointing towards the pod. "Dig it out, carefully!" The laborers, their faces streaked with grime and sweat, redoubled their efforts. They clawed at the wreckage, their movements fueled by a desperate, animalistic energy. Slowly, painstakingly, they cleared the area around the pod, revealing its full form. It was an older model, single occupancy but relatively intact. The access hatch was jammed, but the emergency release mechanism, a manual lever, was still visible. "Help me with this," I ordered, sliding down from the rubble pile, my voice rough with exhaustion and renewed hope. "We need to open the hatch." The laborers set to work. They were losing their grip on reality, their minds fraying under the entity's influence. One of them, a young man named Boran, who had once shown a spark of intelligence, was now staring blankly at the wall, muttering to himself. Another, an older man named Tech, was on his knees, clawing at the ground, his eyes wide with terror. I had to keep them focused, had to keep them moving. The entity was close, I could feel it. We pulled and pried at the hatch release, the rusted metal screeching as it yielded. Finally, the hatch swung open, revealing the cramped interior of the escape pod. It was designed for a single occupant, a last resort for a crew member of the Colossus. The pod's control panel, a simple array of buttons and switches, was surprisingly undamaged. A faint green light flickered on one of the displays, indicating residual power. "Start scavenging!" I yelled over the increasing din of the tremors. "Anything that looks like it can hold a charge. Energy cells, power conduits, anything." The laborers, spurred by my urgency, began to ransack the surrounding area, tearing apart damaged pods, ripping out wires and components. They were like men possessed, their movements frantic and desperate. They brought me anything that looked vaguely technological, and against all odds, some of it was still functional. I started connecting them to the pod's systems, bypassing fried circuits, jury-rigging connections. As I worked, the tremors intensified. The green glow emanating from the cracks in the floor intensified. The laborers were losing it completely, at least the ones still standing. Boran was curled up in a fetal position, rocking back and forth. Tech was smashing his fists against the bulkhead, a growl emanating from his throat. Then, with a sound like the spine of the world cracking, the ground split open. A fissure, wide enough to swallow a man whole, ripped through the floor of the bay, spewing forth a blinding, viridian light. The entity was breaking free. I slammed my fist on the pod's activation switch. The system sputtered, coughed, and then, miraculously, came to life. The pod's internal lights turned on, casting a green glow over the cramped interior. It was now or never. "Get away from the fissure!" I yelled, though I doubt they understood. I scrambled into the pod, my movements hampered by the failing gravity. I hit the launch sequence. The pod vibrated violently, the sound of its engines drowned out by the chaos of the collapsing structure and the rising, shrieking sound emanating from the fissure. As the pod ascended, I looked back. The laborers were still there, silhouetted against the blinding green light. But they weren't focused on the horror beneath their feet. They were kneeling, their faces upturned, their arms outstretched towards my ascending pod. Even in their final moments, they saw me as their god, ascending to the heavens. The pod shot out of the Colossus and into the bruised twilight sky of Scoria. I looked back at the planet, at the skeletal remains of the warship, at the settlement where I had played God. The green glow was spreading rapidly, engulfing the surface, drowning the rust-colored landscape in an intense, emerald light. It was beautiful, in a horrifying way. I was free. I had escaped. But as Scoria receded into the distance, a cold, hard knot of guilt settled in my gut. I had condemned them all, the entire civilization. I had used them, lied to them, and then abandoned them to a fate far worse than death. My hands shook as I gripped the controls of the escape pod, the green glow of Scoria reflecting in my eyes. I was a fugitive now, not from any law, but from my own conscience. My escape was not a victory, but a different kind of imprisonment. The weight of their doom would forever be my burden, a reminder of the god I wasn't and the man I had become. As I looked back at the fading green glow of the planet, I knew that some prisons are made not of bars, but of memories, and some escapes are nothing more than a different kind of hell.